With that same high fidelity sound when it came out of your TV set in 1966, out of that 3-inch speaker in the TV that was probably black and white.
And had a blown out woofer.
That's the theme from the 1966 Batman TV series, and tonight we are going to broaden the Take-Two spotlight and look at this character that keeps resurfacing, reinventing himself, and is, quite frankly, a phenomenon in the summer of 2008. We're talking about Batman, and to have this discussion with me here on Public Radio KCBX, Take-Two, the movie program, in his secret identity as a video store owner, it's my good friend Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, inside our bat cave here, is a guy who I'd be very proud to be Robin to his Batman. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, my friend and yours, Jim Dee. Well, Batman, what do you think? Holy sequel, Batman!
Well, I'll tell you, we just have to acknowledge the fact that the current Batman film, The Dark Knight, in theaters in 2008, this broadcast in the middle of the summer of 2008, perhaps becoming the biggest box office, at least domestically, picture. Maybe it will overtake Titanic, which is the #1 grosser, but certainly a phenomenon in its own right. Not, some sadness attached to this film. Of course, Heath Ledger as the Joker, although we've lost him, but his characterization in this movie is supposed to be phenomenal. But Bob and I are going to dig way back into the archives with this character. I mean, Bob, I got to tell you, there are certain characters that come and go, and they come and go. Batman being created back in 1938, I believe, in Detective Comics number 27 by Bob Kane, and a couple of years later gets his own comic book. But Batman was on the screen as far back as 1943.
In fact, Jimmy, the first actor to play Batman was a fellow named Lewis Wilson. And Batman from 1943, and I think it was Douglas Croft played the first Dick Grayson, or Robin. This was done in 1943. It was a serial for Columbia. And Jimmy, we were talking before we went on the air about what is a serial? Because there's a lot of people out there that would know, and I bet there's a lot of people out there that wouldn't know.
Well, I mean, back in the good old days when before the television, and even though when TV did come in, I think serials were still sort of happening. The second Batman serial was in 1948, and that's where, TVs were starting to pop up here and there. But when you went to the movies, say in 1943, you were there to stay, and you had a whole great evening. You had a cartoon, you had a newsreel, which gave you the latest news, and then maybe some previews, and then you had a chapter of a serial, which would be approximately 20 minutes long. They were called two-reelers. One reeler is about 10 minutes, so this is about 20 minutes. And all sorts of characters have popped off of the comic book pages, including, Flash Gordon. Of course, we have Batman, Captain America, just to name a few. And, then you saw the feature, maybe even a double feature after you saw the feature. So when you went to the movies, it was a great place to hang out. You were there for a full evening of entertainment. And, of course, that serial, or cliffhanger usually, because at the end of the serial, your hero or your Western hero was put into some sort of danger, and you just couldn't figure out how they're going to get out of it. It's called the cliffhanger. You want to get back in that theater seat next Saturday and see how it all turns out. There's a serial.
Well, in 1943, the way it turned out was it's a little dated, very low budget. The villain, a Japanese agent played by J. Carrol Naish. And remember, folks, back in 1943, racial stereotyping was a little loose, free and loose. So that would date this particular serial in a sense. But if you can take that with a grain of salt and just indulge yourself in its low-budget glory, Batman is actually kind of weird fun. The first Batman is kind of like the new Batman. He's kind of dark. You don't know a lot about him. And Well, let's face it, that beat up old car they drive around in this is, and Alfred is their butler drives them around when they're Batman and Robin. I get a vicarious thrill out of this. It's a train wreck, but it's kind of fun to watch. I would recommend it to people who have never seen a serial. You should check it out. I mean, I think the 48 or 49 one with Robert Lowry and Johnny Duncan is a little better. But they're both fun in their own respective ways.
Yeah, you really have to transplant yourself. Of course, when you see the current blockbusters, especially if the new Batmans that are directed by Christopher Nolan, I mean, they are incredibly huge blockbusters. Even the ones that were made in the 90s by Joel Schumacher and Tim Burton, they're huge affairs. And going back to those serials of 1943 and 48 and just notice how they're kind of clunky, they're kind of, I was almost looking at them, Bob, going, well, why do these guys even have suits on? They just become cops or something,
And Batman's ears just keep flopping around.
They do.
Kind of reminds me of my dog, Junior. His ears are just moving all over the place. And remember the scene you were telling me about with in one of them where he's going to throw a punch and his fist gets stuck in his cape and the whole thing comes off.
But in the next scene, it's back on, of course.
Thank goodness someone from continuity was wide awake on this one.
And Bob, it sounds like we're making fun of these, but they are fun. They are, the first incarnation of this comic book hero, which again, in 1943, it had barely been in the comic books for about 3 or 4 years, and there it is. It's a testament to the popularity. In fact, we do have the hook opening. You cannot pull away when you have a serial open like this. This is the opening of the first chapter of the 1943 serial called The Batman.
High atop one of the hills which ring the teeming metropolis of Gotham City, a large house rears its bulk against the dark sky. Outwardly, there's nothing to distinguish this house from many others. But deep in the cavernous basements of this house, in a chamber hewn from the living rock of the mountain, is the strange, dimly lighted, mysteriously secret Bat's Cave, hidden headquarters of America's #1 crime fighter, Batman. Yes, Batman, clad in the somber costume which has struck terror to the heart of many a swaggering denizen of the underworld. Batman, who even now is pondering the plans of a new assault against the forces of crime. A crushing blow against evil in which he will have the valuable aid of his young, two-fisted assistant, Robin, the Boy Wonder. They represent American youth who love their country and are glad to fight for it. Wherever crime raises its ugly head to strike with the venom of a maddened rattlesnake, Batman and Robin strike also. And in this very hour when the Axis criminals are spreading their evil over the world, even within our own land, Batman and Robin stand ready to fight them to the death.
Boy, I'm on board.
How can you resist?
A couple of little notes about the first Batman. The director, Lambert Hillier, also directed a very atmospheric Universal horror film not often talked about, Daughter of Dracula, with Gloria Holden, which was actually a very good entry in the series. For one reason or another, it was ignored unjustly, I think. And he's at the helm in this. And Lewis Wilson, the first Batman, would go on to marry, I think, Albert Cubby Broccoli's sister or a relative. And they, in turn, their son, Michael G. Wilson, who's now, I think, the producer, the executive producer for the Bond series. So a little bit of trivia there. It just goes to show that everything in cinema is relative in more ways than one.
Well, Bob, the thought I had today, too, about looking at these old serials and just getting a big kick out of them and really kind of getting wrapped up into them, they're really a lot of fun. But if you notice when we talked about the way you go to the movies back in the 40s, you had a cartoon and then the serial, maybe Flash Gordon, Buster Crabbe, or Batman or something else. And then the feature Could be anything with Betty Davis. It could be, you know, the big stars. But you notice during this period, at least through the 40s, you know, those superheroes did not end up in feature films. They were in the serials. I don't see, I was really, now maybe you can come up with a title, say in the 40s, that was about a superhero. No, I
No,
mean,
it was all the realm of serials. The only thing I can think of that wasn't a serial was the George Reeves Superman pilot. That was like about a 67-minute theatrical release.
that's right.
Though it was shot as a pilot, and I think they released it trying to reignite interest in the series. I don't even think it was meant to be a feature. And I mean, at 67 minutes, that was only a support feature. I mean, before that, Superman was in serials with Kirk Allen.
Right.
The first Superman. So, yeah, the serial is the domain of the superhero.
And when you're talking about relative to today, it's well, we don't have serials or newsreels, but the superheroes are in the blockbusters, and they are the biggest grossing movies that seem to be coming out.
I mean, I would wonder, you know, yeah, looking back, it's like the serial was it for the superhero, and now, like you said, and when we saw Iron Man, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is a huge budget movie. It's a far cry from the first Batman serial.
Exactly. Well, you know, the first Batman serial out in 1943, I believe it was 12 chapters or 15 chapters. If you see the whole thing, in fact, we should tell you these are available on DVD. You know, when they're put end to end, you're talking about 4.5 hours of Batman back then.
Of Bat action.
Bat action. Well, in 1948, once again, it's Batman and Robin on the silver screen. And I would, you know, I'd really have to research it when the serial's sort of going by the wayside, but I would tend to think that, you know, in the late 40s, they were starting to wane with television. And of course, what the theaters were trying to do is make CinemaScope and everything big and huge, and instead of probably, you know, keeping those old schedules up with the cartoons and the newsreels and so on. However, here is Batman and Robin again in 1948, and the stars are Robert Lowry as the bat-winged crime fighter, and
Johnny Duncan as Robin. And one thing I would recommend about this one, aside from the fact that it is a lot of fun, is that you'll see a lot more familiar faces in the second one. People like House Peters Jr. I mean, if you're a fan of any Westerns that were done in the 40s and 50s, this guy was to Westerns what Richard Jekyll was to war movies. He's just in every one of them. You'll also get to see the great Lyle Talbot. You might remember him from Plan 9 from Outer Space, Glen or Glenda, you know, his Ed Wood period. But he was an actor of, well, I would say considerable talent. He just didn't have a lot of luck. He turned out being the first president of the Screen Actors Guild when it was formed in the early 30s, and the studio heads didn't like it one bit. And I wouldn't say they blacklisted him, but they brownlisted him, pretty much destroying his career. There's a lot of good people in this. It's a lot of fun, and oddly enough, it's a little more modern. Even though it's only 5 or 6 years later, technically it's a bit better made. It's still, I would say, got a lot of B aspects to it, which is necessary. And the Batmobile is still a pile of junk, but an old convertible, spray-painted black. But I don't know. You know what? Who am I to judge? I kind of like that myself.
oh, gotta love it. Well, here's the crux of all of these serials. This one from 1948, Batman and Robin. You know, you've just seen Batman and Robin in an airplane. It's just blown up, and then they're going to hook you to get you back into the theater next week.
Who is
is this mysterious wizard? What new villainy are his men up to? Don't miss Tunnel of Terror, the second exciting chapter of Batman and Robin, at this theater next week.
I'm there.
I'm there too.
Well, boy, you know, we skip now from 1948 to the Batman and Robin serial, which probably, you know, ended with the end of serials near the end of the 40s, and takes us to about 1965-66 for the next appearance of the Bat-winged crime fighter. And this is the TV series. We got to mention this because we do have clips from the movie. We also want to make note of our listeners in Santa Barbara. We've got some special information for you about the Batman movie. But where do we begin here, Bob? I mean, I think we should kind of recall the fact that I'm not sure how popular the Batman serials were back in the 40s, but I remember the Batman television show being absolutely huge. ABC promoted it incredibly well, at least perfectly for maybe a 13 or 14-year-old that I was at the time. I had to see this show. The previews looked great, and at the beginning it didn't really take on all its so-called campy aspects, although I can say that the Batman television show pretty much coined that phrase. I mean, created this, whatever you want to call camp, it's what it was.
Well, you know, in a way, Jim, I think in a loving way, it kind of maintained the atmosphere of the serials. The serials are campy, but they don't mean to be. The TV show was campy, and that's exactly what it was gunning for. And I remember, I agree, it's like we're roughly the same age. It's like that show was a total phenomenon when I was a boy. And looking back upon it now, I would get half the jokes, and the other half I'd be scratching my crew-cutted head going, what's going on? And my dad would be sitting in the back roaring. And it came to light for me when, I think I was around 8 in 66 when the movie came out. And of course, I had to drag my poor dad to take me to see the movie. And you can imagine the theater filled with screaming boys, out of control, and every one of them shepherded by their dad. Because I'm sure the moms are saying, I ain't taking him. I've had to put up with him all week. You take him to the movies. And my dad was no different. He's sitting there quietly while stuff is flying through the air. I mean, the place is, it's like a wrestling match, utter bedlam. And the movie starts, and the movie is very close to the TV show. In fact, due to contractual problems, 20th Century Fox owns the rights to the TV show. Warner Brothers owns the right to the newer movie franchise, starting with the Tim Burton Batman in '89 up to and including the Christian Bale Batmans of today. So they can't release the TV series, but we have the movie. Anyhow,
Well, why can't they?
I don't know. That I'm really chomping at the bit for the TV show again.
Me too.
Because now I'm the age my father was then. I want to laugh at the in-jokes. I want Sammy Davis Jr. I want to laugh at Peter Lawford. You know, I had no idea who these guys were. You know, you figure it out during the reruns when you're a teenager, but that's a little different. You know, it's like the thing was, when the movie came on, and it's like, oh boy, it's Batman. We're laughing at all the Bat things, and after a while, when we're not being bamboozled with Bat gimmicks, the dialogue, all the dads are laughing, and the kids don't understand. And that's the beauty of this. It's for kids. We've got to go out and spend all our parents' money to buy the gimmicks, but at least they're giving the parents the in-jokes, the smoke and drink, you know, nuanced jokes. And you get people like Julie Newmar, who I understand is not feeling well right now, and our special Take Two love goes out to her. What a beautiful gal, and a great cat. Well, all the cat women were great,
Well,
but
she
I
was
think she is the cat woman.
Yeah. Well, to give you Bob and I are getting all excited about the Batman TV show. We will give you the trailer. This is the preview to the movie of Batman 1966.
Quick! Everyone! Flee for your lives!
Emergency. Batman speaking. Warning all of you to brace yourselves for big news.
The biggest.
Tell them, Robin.
Holy superlatives, Batman. It's really exciting. Soon, very soon, Batman and I will be catapulting right out of your TV sets and onto your theater screens.
That's right, Robin. Our first full-length motion picture feature in color opens a whole new world of thrills. The big screen gives us more space on land, sea, and in the air to challenge the most cataclysmic collection of super criminals ever. Their minimum objective must be the entire world.
And here are the dastardly villains. The Catwoman.
Oh, you're going to see the perfect crime when I get Batman in my claws.
The Joker.
Have you heard this one? It'll kill you, Batman!
The Penguin.
There are two eggs this wily bird is going to scramble. Batman and Robin.
The Riddler.
Question. Who's going to make the feathers fly and knock Batman and Robin out of the sky?
See, the new weapons in the Bat Arsenal combat the forces of evil. The Batcopter. The exploding, man-eating shark.
Holy sardine!
The relentless Megaton Magnet. The unholy Quartet's secret submarine.
Fire one! Fire one!
The Batboat in action. The deadly disintegrator. The attack on the Batcave.
Holy hallucination!
You'll blast through the skies on these mad, manned missiles.
And you'll be with me, Robin, at the Bat Scanner, eavesdropping on Batman's romance. And you'll shudder at the death-dealing Polaris missiles.
Brace yourself, Robin. This could be the end.
And that's just a sample of the exciting exploits ahead in our first feature motion picture.
Holy memoranda, folks. Make a note not to miss it.
Good thinking, Robin.
This is too good.
Oh, we're here as this is playing. We're laughing really hard. Just to seeing those lines on paper and just the way they're delivered by Adam West and Burt Ward.
I mean, I really believe, Jimmy, Adam West doesn't get the credit he deserves. He's brilliant in this because he's not taking it seriously at all, and yet he brings a special magic to his bat role. And we might go down the list. The Catwoman, I believe, in the film, portrayed by the lovely Lee Merriweather. Eartha Kitt was the other Catwoman. So it's like along with Julie Newmar, like holy cow, Batman. We have the wonderful Cesar Romero as the Joker. Let's face it, they wouldn't make an actor like this anymore. The wonderful Burgess Meredith is the Penguin, and Rick Martel's Air Force buddy. Of course, we're talking about the immortal Frank Gorshin as the Riddler.
Bob, I was watching some of Batman Forever, which is 96, and I really like Jim Carrey, but as the Riddler, Frank Gorshin just has him beat hands down. Sorry, Jim.
It's gotta be. I mean, I remember reading in one of Adam West's. I think he had wrote a book of memoirs of his years as Batman. He said after they got done filming, he went out partying with Frank Gorshin, and that they went to some party somewhere, and Gorshin disappeared in a pile of beautiful beehived women, and all he could hear was the Riddler laugh.
I think Frank Gorshin attained that maniacal craziness, but then, it's this sort of borderline crazy. I mean, I think he nailed it so perfectly and just went so perfectly, just over the top. But I love Frank Gorshin as the Riddler.
And I think it's worth mentioning, too, that in the Batman movie from 1966, the drop-in guest star, none other than Morro Bay's own, the immortal Jack LaLanne.
Oh, really?
That's right.
Oh, I got to go back and
Seen
watch that part.
from the Batcopter. And he's on the top of some building in Hollywood with a bevy of beauties, putting them through their paces. And it's really hilarious. Because you should remember with the show, it's like they'd be climbing up a wall.
Oh, yes.
And the window would open, and Sammy Davis Jr. would stick his head out, or Tallulah Bankhead. I mean, you never knew. See, the kids wouldn't get that, and that's why I so much want to go back and revisit it again.
Well,
I also want to see the one where Batman and the Joker are surfing. That one was that one just about sent me over the edge the last time I saw it.
Well, the tough thing about the TV show not being released, Bob, is the fact that now would be the prime time. I mean, Batman is such a hot commodity. You'd think they would come out with it.
Come on, you guys. Get with it.
Get the legal ramifications worked out.
So you split it 50-50. Everybody's going to win with this.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more. We've got some interesting conversations with, believe it or not, Adam West and Burt Ward. But we are talking about Batman tonight on Take Two, the movie program on public radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo and KSBX Santa Barbara. It's also KSBX HD1 San Luis Obispo. And we are streaming at kcbx.org. More on Batman in a moment.
You're listening to Take Two on public radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara, streaming at kcbx.org. And you can write to us at movies@kcbx.org. We're back on Take Two, the movie program. It's public radio KCBX. My name is Jim Dee. I'm here with my good friend Bob Whiteford. We're talking about the phenomenon of Batman. Of course, The Dark Knight, perhaps poised to be one of the highest grossing pictures ever to be released in this country.
Titanic is the one to beat, but Bob and I are delving into the past of Batman, including the serials of the 1940s, and now we're stuck in the mid-60s. We won't be stuck there too long, but how fun is this? The phenomenon of Batman, the television show with Adam West and Burt Ward, and again, another reinvention of the character because like you said, Bob, the kind of camp aspects of the serials, almost unintentional, were the intention of the '66 or 1960s television show and the movie, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. And those elements kind of play out in the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher films in kind of ways. We'll talk about that in this next half hour. But some of those films, we'll just talk about them. It's been an interesting reinvention of the character, but seemingly a really enduring character, and that is Bob Kane's Batman. So, Bob, we got to hear from Adam West and Burt Ward as they talk about making the Batman movie.
I think this is a great little clip we're about to play for you, because they're telling us what it was like behind the scenes making these movies, and it's really interesting hearing them tell it in their own voices. And also, I think it's worth mentioning, as Jim had alluded to earlier, our Santa Barbara listeners are going to be rather enthralled with this clip. One of the best scenes from the movie is shot on a pier. And, well, let's have the boys tell us about it.
Here's Adam West and Burt Ward talking about the Batman movie from 1966.
I was told that our shooting schedule was 6 weeks. However, I think I worked a little over 30 days, and I wanted a little time off, so I did ask them to try to cram my stuff together. The locations were interesting because we got to go to Santa Barbara and use that wonderful pier there. It attracted so many folks, locally, that it was tough to work on the pier, and Bert and I would have to leave by submarine every evening. They got us off in a boat at the ocean end of the pier because we couldn't get through the other side.
Technologically, we had a tremendous crew, and everybody played their characters to the hilt. Everyone that on the crew loved doing the film. The actors and actresses, enjoyed it as well. And Adam and I had a great time. I mean, we were basically reprising what we were already doing on the series. I think what was interesting about making the movie Batman was that instead of it being the first thing that we did and then a television series coming afterwards, we already had a successful television series, and the movie was like the icing on the cake. We already had a following.
We did the movie the first summer hiatus after we started the series. Originally, they intended to do the movie first and use the movie, the theatrical release, to sell the series. But we got lucky in that the series was accepted and went on the air. We did, I think, 34 episodes and then did the movie. Why the movie? The movie was done to sell the series overseas. It was released overseas, and indeed it worked. And it kind of prepared the way for a series that nobody understood the mix. Nobody quite got it, what it was for some time.
Look at this pair of joking riddles. What does a turkey do when he flies upside down?
He gobbles up.
Of course.
And number 2.
What weighs 6 ounces, sits in a tree, and is very dangerous?
A sparrow with a machine gun.
Yes, of course.
Batman was very bizarre and had no resemblance really to real life. And the comedic aspects of it, the theater of the absurd, these were the things that I kind of concentrated on and enjoyed mostly.
That's the voice of Adam West and Burt Ward talking about the Batman series and the movie. And, Bob, I never thought about, here's Adam West talking about the theater of the absurd. And I would never even think of that. But, of course, in retrospect, and as you have the same, drive to want to go back and watch some of these TV shows, and then thinking about it through the theater of the absurd and pulling off those lines the way they do. A lot of fun. And, also thinking about the movie and the Batman television show in the 60s, I mean, this is the comic book version of Batman, maybe heightened a little bit with the campiness, and as opposed to how the character kind of goes through a metamorphosis with the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher films, and then finally to let's call him the Dark Knight now, a far cry from what was happening in the mid-1960s.
I think it's worth noting in that clip, too, Jim, some great character actors there. Neil Hamilton as Commissioner Gordon, and of course the immortal Stafford Rep as Police Chief O'Hara. You had Madge Blake as Aunt Harriet.
Yeah.
Alan Napier as Alfred. I mean, it seemed like, what it reminded me of in retrospect was, remember Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater in the 80s? Where everybody and their grandmother wanted to be on the show.
Yes.
I think that was true of Batman at this time in the 60s. Like, everybody wanted to be on it, and probably was. I mean, when you think about who wasn't on it, it's a very small list.
Yeah, it almost reminds... Not to make a comparison, but to like Laugh-In. I mean, when Laugh-In was huge, also Batman was huge. It seemed like everybody wanted to get on it and, share in the fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think Laugh-In and Batman from this era, definitely there's a link. They're kindred spirits.
Well, we don't have the information of exactly how many seasons Batman went. It was probably about 2 or 3, maybe 4. But of course, after the Batman television series, they have it here from 1966 to 68. We go an entire, we go all the way to, well, there were some spin-offs. We had Batgirl on TV, but we
with the lovely Yvonne Craig.
There we go. But then we have to go all the way to 1989. We're talking about almost 22 years later, and the reemergence of Batman in the huge blockbuster by Tim Burton, and that's the first one, entitled simply Batman, with the Joker portrayed by Jack Nicholson. And I remember seeing the previews to this, and almost in the same fashion as seeing the previews to the television show, I just thought, oh man, it looks like they've got it. And it looks kind of dark, and Gotham City looks kind of brooding, and oh my gosh, it's Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Hopefully they have it all right. And at least, when the initial release of the Tim Burton Batman, the first one, huge. I think it ended up grossing like $250 million, which probably by today's inflated dollars, that's more like a $400 million opening or something. Don't research my math on that, but still.
Is this the one with Michael Keaton, Jim?
This is with Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne and
Kim Basinger.
Yes, and all the Batmans have great Alfreds. Michael Gough, who wonderful British actor. We've known him from a number of Hammer films, like The Horror of Dracula, a few others.
Conga.
Yeah. But he made a fabulous Alfred, and
yes,
of course the current Alfred, Michael Caine. I can't think of a better choice as well. But, what was interesting about the first Batman was it sort of teetered on the brink of being more serious, in the fact that, the origin of Batman is he saw his parents killed, and therefore he becomes a crime fighter, an avenger, so to speak. And in the first film, they sort of get into that a little bit, although truth be told, I was never really crazy about the first film, other than the production design. I thought Jack Nicholson was just okay. And they sort of get into what everyone's talking about now with The Dark Knight, and that is the fact of the sort of reciprocal relationship, or the sort of symbiotic relationship of Batman and the Joker, or any villain. They sort of need each other to survive or give any meaning to themselves, And, there's near the end of the first Batman where Batman does have the Joker, Jack Nicholson, and they talk about that just sort of briefly. And as the pictures progress, as we go through Joel Schumacher and he turns it much more comic book, we're now back into the darker Batman, into the darker aspects of his origins. And it's interesting, these different metamorphoses of this same character who was so different back in 1966.
Well, the '89 version. I mean, visually, it's way out there.
Yeah.
The sets. I mean, I think the whole thing is shot on a back lot, and the sets are just outlandish looking, and Tim Burton definitely bringing some of his Beetlejuice mojo to this one, and then some. I think that's what kind of distinguishes this one from the ones that came after. See, for myself, they're all kind of a blur.
Well, they are.
Yeah, I have a hard time distinguishing one from the other. It's like, okay, one is Michael Keaton.
One and two were Michael Keaton.
And then there's Val Kilmer.
And then
George Clooney. And I like all three actors quite a bit, but I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Well, one thing we want to get across to you is going from those no-budget serials of the 1940s to the, quickly shot movie and television show of the 60s, we finally have Batman in a place where it's a blockbuster, it's a huge motion picture. And what we'd like to do is play you the theme from the very first Batman movie. And when you talked about Tim Burton getting his Beetlejuice mojo, of course, who does he employ but Oingo Boingo's great composer, well, not composer, he was Oingo Boingo for the most part back in the day, but Danny Elfman, who has also teamed up with Tim Burton with lots of great music. And I think what is great about the Batman movie theme, we're going to play you some of it, is it kind of kicks up that John Williams sort of thing. It gets that bombast going. It gets like that epic movie thing happening. And I think Danny Elfman really even pushes it even further, and he's a perfect fit for, this bombastic music for the first Batman film. Let's give you a taste of the great Danny Elfman and the Batman movie theme from 1989. It's music composed by Danny Elfman, and that is the part of the theme of the Batman motion picture, a huge hit in 1989. And but still, as we're listening to that music, Bob and I are sitting here talking about the the reinvented Batman, starting with the two Tim Burtons, 1 and 2, Batman Returns being the second one, and then Joel Schumacher taking over the helm as director. With Batman Forever and then Batman and Robin. Before I forget, Bob, we should say that, Jack Nicholson made the great sweet deal with his Joker role. I think I don't know the specifics, but he might have foregone his regular salary to take a piece of the action, and I think he ended up with making like $50 million or something. It's
laughing all the way to the penitentiary.
Yes. But, I'm not sure the specifics, but Jack did very well for his role in this blockbuster that it turned out to be. And, again, the Batman character, I think in all of the movies that were made from about 89 to the middle of the 1990s all had sort of a similar formula. It's not one villain against Batman, it's usually two. I mean, they've sort of continued that sort of formula. But for me, the problem with the Batman movies, as you say, were kind of a blur. They kind of teeter into getting into a darker area, and I'm not saying it needs to stay there. In fact, after the Joel Schumacher films, Bob, I was thinking they should get David Lynch to direct one of these.
Wow, wouldn't that have been great?
That would have been interesting, a whole different Batman. But, Christopher Nolan is almost there. But we can talk about this issue that comes up in the Batman films about him being a dark Avenger, being almost, what am I looking for? The Charles Bronson type character, the Death Wish type.
Right.
The word is
vigilante.
Vigilante. That's the one I'm looking for, and just sort of that thin line, a very fine line between the person who is committing crimes and the person who is trying to prevent them, but creating chaos along the way. But for me, Bob, the problem with most of the Batman movies, the ones from, both of them from Tim Burton and from Joel Schumacher, is they kind of want to veer into that area. Yeah, this is a dark character, but then they, especially the Joel Schumacher ones, and I like Val Kilmer as a Batman, he was pretty good, but we go into this comic book neon world where everything is bright and shiny, or perhaps in Batman and Robin where we see Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, and we get into that sort of, what big star can we cast in the role as the big villain? And sure, it's fun to see Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey in Batman Forever as Two-Face and the Riddler respectively, but gosh, they're just chewing up the scenery pretty much, and when it gets down to it, I don't think of these villains in a sense as being that threatening. They're more threatening in a comic book way as opposed to being actual threats, that Batman's going to, triumph in the end. So as the production values on all those films, the production designs are pretty remarkable. I felt there was sort of a wavering path where we go from these very neon lit kind of comic book scenarios, and then we delve into a little bit of personal troubles with Bruce Wayne and his childhood and so on. But then they just sort of steer away and go off on another tangent. And I always felt that perhaps the newer ones with Christopher Nolan really hit it better, where you get into the personalities of the characters and the personality, the personality conflicts and so on drive the film as opposed to the special effects, is what I think I'm getting at here.
Well, in a sense, Jimmy, these films from this phase of the Batman saga, I've never been a big fan of them. I always found them to be kind of top-heavy and overloaded. And, I mean, I'm not trying to be a snob about it.
Nor
I
am
just want
I.
to be entertained. But oddly enough, I didn't find myself engaged at all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't laugh when I was supposed to laugh. I didn't get all weak-kneed when the special effects said, you will act this way. It's like, no, I just didn't care for them. I mean, there's definitely some great technical attributes to them. They're well-made films. It's just, I think, the big budget and all the big stars, top-heavy is all I could think of. They just didn't affect me. And when we were talking during the break, I find they all kind of blend together. I have a hard time telling them all apart. And I know that people out there who have seen them all say, well, that guy must be just full of it. But it's true. I mean, just in a very esoteric way, or I found them all equally non-affecting. So I'm sorry. I tried. It just didn't work for me.
I think, for me, the word that comes to mind is formulaic, and they sort of just...
Thank you.
They have maybe a good set piece here, a little bit of great action or good visuals, but like you, Bob, when I came out, I didn't see the George Clooney one. Dare I say? I should say that, but I guess from the previous three, I wasn't really, inclined to go see it.
Well, all three of the actors that played Batman, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, I like all three of them a lot. They've done some great work. And I dare say it, I'm a fan of all three in a big way. It just didn't happen for me.
Well, we are going to play a clip here from Batman Forever. This is essentially the third film made, beginning with Tim Burton's 2, Batman and Batman Returns. And, Val Kilmer, I thought, could have been a good Bruce Wayne, but he was only in this one picture. And also in this film, the introduction of Robin, who is played by Chris O'Donnell. And here we have one of the non-explosive moments in the film, where we do get into the history and perhaps the reason that these superheroes exist because of their rather shocking childhoods. So this is perhaps a serious moment in Batman Forever. Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne, Chris O'Donnell as Robin.
All I can think about every second of the day is getting Two-Face. He took my whole life. When I was out there tonight, I imagined it was him that I was fighting. Even when I was fighting you. And all the pain went away. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Good. Because you gotta help me find him. And when we do, I'm the one who kills him.
So you're willing to take a life?
As long as it's Two-Face.
Then it will happen this way. You make the kill. But your pain doesn't die with Harvey, it grows. So you run out into the night to find another face. And another. And another. Until one terrible morning you wake up and realize that revenge has become your whole life. And you won't know why.
You can't understand. Your family wasn't killed by a maniac.
Yes, they were. We're the same.
If we're the same, Bruce, help me. All right, train me. Let me be your partner.
No. I can't. You still have a choice.
Look, Bruce, I'm a part of this whether you like it or not.
It's a scene from Batman Forever. It's Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne, Chris O'Donnell before he becomes Robin, but the two of them talking about how both of their families were killed before their very eyes. In the case of Robin, the Two-Face villain played by Tommy Lee Jones in the film. It's interesting. The thought I had listening to that clip, Bob, was what I found interesting about the last two Batmans, the current one, which is the huge box office smash, directed by Christopher Nolan, was not only them hiring him, because he only made a few pictures before this. He made Insomnia, which is a remake of a Swedish film, or
by the same title.
By the same title, and then of course Memento, a very small film. But when in that scene when they're talking about constantly seeking revenge, I'm thinking about Christopher Nolan's film Memento, where the whole film is almost like a repeat of revenge, and it's a little synchronicity there. But what I find interesting with the current Batmans is the fact that they were willing to take a chance on a relatively new director, not very many films under his belt, and I think Christopher Nolan has really stepped up to the plate and made some amazing films. And again, the reinvention of this Batman character, and again, the worldwide acclaim, and everyone seems to be hot for Batman once again.
Well, Jim, I think Christopher Nolan is a great pick. I mean, I think about Memento. I think about a film he did before that called Following. Both tales are very dark and obsessive, and he translates well to the new new version of Batman, The Dark Knight. And Christian Bale is a terrific pick to play Batman. I mean, I think the new series is definitely a step up. It's almost like how the new Hulk was so good. It's like you forget the Ang Lee Hulk. I hate to say that, but I think this Batman series is far superior to the movie series that came before.
Oh, I completely agree. And of course, the star power also in the new Batman films. Of course, you got Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine, as we mentioned, for Alfred. I can't think of a better Alfred currently, although I like all the Alfreds, even Alan Napier. Is that his name from the TV series? And boy, I'm thinking who else is in the film? But
can you imagine Alfie as Alfred? I mean, it's too brilliant.
Well, it's been a pleasure going over this very enduring character, Batman, going back to his origin, 1938 or so. And this, folks, you got to check out those serials that we talked about earlier, because we're Bob and I are here looking at some of these pictures, and those bat ears, one's kind of swayed one way and the other way, and this is supposed to be a menacing crime fighter who scares the heck out of you when he shows up, and you got to see these pictures for at least the charm alone. So
absolutely,
2 serials, one in 1943 and 1948. You can check out the movie with Adam West and Burt Ward from 1966. We'll keep our fingers crossed if the TV show is ever released. Enjoy the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher films. There's a lot of pizzazz and a lot of neon, but I think finally Warner Brothers has it right with Christopher Nolan at the helm as director, and what could be the biggest grossing film ever released in this country, The Dark Knight.
I'd be very pleased with that, Jimmy. I'm no big fan of Titanic. I want to see it get knocked off.
We want to thank you for listening. We want to thank Hank, our projectionist extraordinaire. We will see you next week on Take Two.